Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. One of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts, Alex and Sean. On this episode, we are going to be talking the NFL Draft and the first two episodes of The Last Dance, which we are recording before episodes 3 and 4, mind you. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford Ice Hogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford Ice Hogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. I know season is in hiatus, maybe even canceled, but that shouldn't stop you from heading on over to icehogs.com. Get yourself a hat, shirt, jersey, tickets, and more. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. Alex, welcome back. How was your Easter?
It was good. You know, obviously we had to do it in quarantine, but we made the best of it. The church was very nice to do midnight service via stream, so everyone could just stream it on their computer or TV, which we did. We still had our midnight meal, which we do as per tradition, and then we had a big family Zoom meeting with a lot of the cousins on Sunday. So, you know, we had a nice day for it. We did the best we could and made the best of it. So, you know, considering the circumstances, I can't complain.
Yeah, and you know, I'm really happy to hear that you guys maintained quarantine through it. You know, it's easy being like, well, it's just family, it's just a holiday, and then not. You know, I had this week I got some news. So a friend of mine, his brother's friend came to their house a couple weeks ago, and he was apparently a carrier of COVID-19 and got my friend's brother sick, who then got the entire family sick. And,
oh, man.
And his sister died this week.
Oh, that's awful.
She had to have an emergency C-section because she was pregnant. They saved the baby. She went on a ventilator and never made it off. So, you know, it's important. Well, one person being sick kind of sent this whole family into a spiral because the whole family got sick. And, you know, they lost a family member. So it's, you know, it's something to really take seriously. And I know there's folks out there that are like, well, you know, the weather's getting nice, or I don't know anybody that's died, or I don't know anybody that's gotten really sick. You know, it's count your blessings that you don't.
Yeah, you know, we have a lot of elderly family members. So that right there was just us saying, no, there's no way we could get together. We can't risk that. Because, you know, like many people have said, elderly are at high risk. And on the other side of the family, my dad's side, I mean, luckily, my grandmother is currently in a nursing home. And my grandfather can't join her yet because of COVID-19. And they're doing tests for everybody there. So that's good. But, you know, it's still something we worry about. You know, nursing homes have been hit pretty hard with this, naturally, you could imagine. So, you know, it's just one of those things you got to keep taking seriously, because you don't really know until you're actually sick if you have it or not. You could be carrying it and not having any symptoms for a while.
Yep. Very, very scary stuff. So, you know, let's segue right into the NFL draft. I don't know about you. The NFL draft is kind of like Christmas morning to me in any given year, but it was especially, you know, a lot more unenjoyable this year because we haven't had sports in how many weeks.
Right.
So just to have something live, just brought back some semblance of normalcy, I guess.
Yeah, it was kind of, even though everything was in quarantine, it was kind of, all systems go for the NFL. Luckily they were able to do it in such a way where people could be safe. But, you still had your traditional draft picks. Everything was broadcasted. You had the little tune played for every draft pick. So again, they made the best of it. And you can't expect it to be 100% like it normally is. But, I think for what it was okay. And, it was kind of fun seeing all the GMs and the coaches in their houses and seeing their setups. So I think they tried to make it, as cheery as they could for the people watching.
There was definite things that I enjoyed this year more than other years, and there's things that I obviously didn't. I do like seeing the players at the draft come out, hug the commissioner, and in their fancy get-ups, and the fans. I love seeing the fans because I, for a number of years, was one of those fans that was at the draft. I think I've gone to, obviously, the draft in Chicago, and then I went to, I think, 6 of them in New York. So I've been to a number of drafts, and that's so much fun. So I miss the fans there. I miss the players coming out. I don't want to see the commissioner's basement anymore. But the cool
I don't
thing,
think he wants us to see it either.
but I did love that they had way more cameras in potential draftees' houses. I think that's a blast.
Yeah.
That was cool. I liked, I liked seeing more of the war room stuff. Although it's funny because when you see the war room, it's a bunch of people in one room, and it seems much more analytical because they've got charts and they've got boards with people's names and their big binders. And now you got like somebody's got a laptop and a cell phone and looks like they're just lounging or playing Animal Crossing or something.
They look like the average Joe that's currently working from home right now.
Yeah. But I think the coolest thing for me, though, is I liked the joint broadcast between ESPN and the NFL Network.
Yes. Yeah. I like that too.
Typically, I flip back and forth between the broadcasts, because the commercials aren't always timed up, and you're like, I like this guy, but not this guy, and they're like, oh, they're especially in the later rounds when they're talking, they might miss some players or they have to come back to guys, and I want to see who they're, what they say about this guy. And so I'm flipping back and forth, but I liked this. I thought it was, that was neat. And so there's a few things that they could take away and incorporate into future drafts, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think it kind of gave us the opportunity to try something new, even though they were under unfortunate circumstances. And then you can take notes and say, hey, people seem to like this, this, and this. Why not keep doing it for the future? I think that's something you could take away from this.
Right. So, let's jump into the Bears picks. Mm-hmm. So there was no first round pick. But we did get a full glimpse now into the actual trade. So basically, we sent the Oakland Raiders or the Las Vegas Raiders Josh Jacobs and Damon Arnett, and we got back Cole Kmet and Khalil Mack.
I'm cool.
I'm good with that.
I'm cool. I'm perfectly fine.
So the Bears they didn't have a first round pick. Their first pick in the draft was in the second round, number 43 overall. So a fairly early pick in the second round. And there was a number of good players still left available. At that point, there was only one safety off the board. And so there was pretty much every safety. No tight ends were taken. There was still a bunch of good wide receivers. There was, there was some offensive linemen. There was a lot of good players that they could have drafted. And the ultimate pick was Cole Kmet the tight end out of Notre Dame. I don't know what your thoughts are. My thoughts are, do I mind them bringing Cole Kmet? No, not at all. I think he's a very good tight end. He's definitely improving the roster and what I'm anticipating Matt Nagy wants to do with this offense. And so I think that's a positive. But I think you could have gotten him later. I think you could have either traded back, picked up some additional picks, and still gotten Cole Kmet, or drafted somebody else and then used the number 50 overall pick, so 7 picks later, and gotten Cole Kmet. I think either one of those things could have happened. So that's I guess my disappointment is I felt it's not disappointment at getting him, it's getting him too early, I believe.
I pretty much share your same feelings. Like, he's probably the best tight end in the draft, and keep in mind that draft was not very deep in terms of tight end. You could have gotten a more talented player at that spot. You definitely could have, and you could have gotten him later, I agree. But they still did fill an essential need, and Cole Kmet has gotten, he's not blowing people out of the water, but it sounds like he can be a good asset. If he's a guy that can block and create space as a target, then obviously that's a huge get for the Bears because they need that in a tight end. So, like you said, I'm not mad about getting Cole Kmet either. Yeah, I think they could have done better there. They could have. But it's not like they got some completely weird off-the-wall player that was very questionable. So, I'll say okay.
What they got is, so they're a team that, for having so many tight ends, they were in desperate need for a tight end. So they were a very tight end thirsty team. And Cole Kmet is hands down the best tight end in this draft. I mean,
right.
And I say that as, a couple years down the road, we could be like, oh man, somebody really impressed us, like George Kittle, where he went in fifth round, fourth, fifth round. And, obviously nobody expected that, but based on everybody's draft board, I don't think there's a single draft board where Cole Kmet is not the number one tight end by leaps and bounds. So you did get the best tight end in the draft. You were right. It was a very weak tight end class. But Cole Kmet is a good player. He's a big guy, 6'6", 262, ran a respectable 4.7. He's a Chicago fan. He's a Chicago Bears fan. He grew up in the suburbs. He
tweeted "Fly the W," so that's a win for me.
Yeah, he's a Cubs fan. He's got really good size. He creates space. He can go get the ball. Once he gets it, he can be really tough to take down. The thing with him is he's got really good hands. He's just in games, he becomes a body catcher. And I think that's, while most of the times, that's fine. It becomes a bad habit, and you want to make sure you're catching with your hands rather than in your body. So that's a bad habit that he gets into, and he needs to be a better blocker. He's a really willing blocker, but I think he just needs to improve his ability. But as a Y tight end, he could step right in day one and be be helping this offense. And I think what you'll see is, this year Jimmy Graham will be the number one guy, and to start off with, and then either partway through the season or definitely by next year, it'll be Cole Kmet. He's much more of a Jason Witten type than a George Kittle type, and not the level of play, but in style, where Jason Witten doesn't seem like he's doing anything athletic to get open, but he's getting open and making those catches. Where George Kittle is just so athletic out there, and he's doing, these amazing things out there.
So, okay, I want to talk quickly while we're on the topic of what tight ends could look like on this team. A good thing also about getting Cole Kmet is that he's younger, so that way you can have a solution long term. I think that's a big win, personally. But just looking forward at the potential roster this year, like you said, it's pretty obvious Jimmy Graham is going to be number one. He's the veteran. He's the experienced guy. Maybe old and washed up, but he's going to be the number one. And then you'll have Cole Kmet. And then I was talking about this on Twitter last night, thinking about who would take the third string.
Demetrius Harris.
You think Demetrius Harris is your guy?
Yeah, he's the veteran. They brought him in. I think he's got the inside job. I think they're going to keep 4 tight ends.
Oh, okay. I mean, I agree with that too.
Especially with the expanded roster, I think they're going to keep 4. So here's the list of names: Jimmy Graham, Cole Kmet, Adam Shaheen, Ben Broniker, Darian Clark, Demetrius Harris, J.P. Holtz, Jesper Horsted, Dax Raymond, Eric Saubert.
Yeah, if they're going to do 4 tight ends, I think the guys I'd personally go with would be Demetrius Harris and Ben Broniker. Those are the guys I'd go with. I think the Adam Shaheen experiment, I think that ship has sailed. I don't see that working in the future. I just don't.
No, I agree with you. I think they're going to give him the shot, but he's going to be on a real short leash. I think, and honestly, sadly, I think he gets injured in the preseason or in training camp, and they just do an injury settlement. So that's usually how these types of things work. You get a guy and you're like on the fence of cutting him, and he gets a little injury, and you go, you know what, injury settlement, walk away from him. And sadly, I feel that's what's going to happen to Adam Shaheen. I would love for him to finally just be healthy, put it together, figure it out, and be the guy that thought we were getting when we drafted him, and have, an absolutely, three tight ends with ability. And you're right, Ben Broniker probably makes it because he's plays special teams.
Yeah, I do too. I just don't think you could count on that at this point. And, obviously they cut Trey Burton, and I think we kind of knew that was going to be a big possibility, and it's probably a good thing too, because you just don't know what you're going to get out of him either. And, you would have, if you kept Trey Burton and then you had Cole Kmet and Jimmy Graham, you'd be saying, okay, Trey Burton's probably either going to be your number 2 or number 3. Can you rely on him to be a number 2? And wouldn't you want your first draft pick to try to get some playing time? So obviously, I think anticipating moves for tight ends in the draft, like getting Cole Kmet, obviously that's one of the main reasons they cut Trey Burton as well as others. You heard about the injuries and all that good stuff, and just what happened over the past year or so. But I think you're right about Adam Shaheen. I think since he's been so injury prone, I think the next time that there is an injury, it's probably just going to be the end right there. And yeah, I think your point about Demetrius Harris is very valid. And I do think that they will carry 4 tight ends. It's just, for me, the 3 spot, to me, it's between Harris and Ben Broniker. And I guess you're probably right about Harris probably getting the nod over that because he's the veteran. I also think, like you said, with special teams, they would want to keep Ben Broniker around. I just don't see Jesper Horsted or J.P. Holtz beating out any of those guys. Even though you saw a few nice things from Jesper Horsted last year, I think that it's probably safer to go with a Broniker and a Demetrius Harris.
Absolutely. I think Dax Raymond and Eric Saubert are just gone.
Yeah.
But I think one if not both, of J.P. Holtz and Jesper Horsted probably going to make the practice squad.
Oh, I agree.
Because, your full roster of tight ends, you're not, although you improved it by drafting somebody really high, it's still a lot of question marks there. But it's you're still not settled on that position yet. So, you want to have some guys that can work with the team, learn the offense, that have had some games under their belt and know the coaching staff, et cetera, and have them on the practice squad. I think at least one of those guys will make the practice squad, but Adam Shaheen, I think it's very difficult for him to make this roster just because of how disappointing he's been.
I agree. And at least if you have, say, Jesper Horsted or JP Holtz on the practice squad, if there is an injury and you need to bring them aboard the main roster, you already somewhat know what they can kind of bring for you. So, it's at least, I don't see any of those guys ever being like big time playmakers in the NFL, but at least you know what they have and you could plug them in as depth if needed.
So the second pick the Bears had was 7 picks later. So the 50th overall pick, they picked Jaylon Johnson, cornerback out of Utah. He is a guy that I think they got a steal on. He was on a lot of draft boards, a mid first round pick. He's got a pretty high draft grade. He's a fairly big corner, 6 foot, 193, ran a 4.5, so respectable speed. First team all Pac-12. Good size for a corner, real tough, physical. He'll go out there and challenge a wide receiver. He'll actually win 50-50 battles because he's physical and he's got really good hands. He plays the ball in the air really well, great ball skills, and really good hands. So, for interceptions and good vision. The knock on him is he had the torn labrum that he played with all season that he had surgery on. He can lunge a little bit, needs to work on his footwork, and he's got good speed, but not great speed. So he can be burned by speed guys.
I really like this pick. I think that addressing secondary is important, and I think a lot of people wanted to address that with their first pick. They didn't want them to draft a tight end because they had a lot of elite safeties and corners that were still on the board. But, since you did take the tight end with that first pick, with the second one, getting one of the more notable cornerbacks on the board, I think that's a really good pick. And it sounds like his shoulder is going to be okay. So, you hope that definitely translates to when they actually start practicing and having preseason games and whatnot and start playing in the regular season. So, yeah, I really like this pick. I am very high on him, as a lot of people are. I think as long as he's healthy, you could see some really good things from this kid. And again, he's another kid that's young, too.
So this is another position where the Bears had a lot of bodies. So not including the undrafted rookies that they bring aboard, just guys on the roster. They've got 11 cornerbacks. But, you obviously, Kyle Fuller's your guy on the one side.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as your slot corner, that's going to be a battle between Duke Shelley and Buster Screen. And I'm very happy with the two slot corner guys, because Buster Screen, I think, did a really great job last year. And Duke Shelley's a guy who I'm pretty high on, that they drafted late last year. So that makes me happy. But on the other side of Kyle Fuller, you're like, okay, who's going to be the starter? And it was, before the draft, you were like, all right, it seems like it's going to be a fight between Artie Burns, who was kind of a draft bust that they brought in this year, Trey Roberson, the guy from the Canadian League that they brought in, and Kevin Tolliver, who was on the roster last year. And you're like, I don't know, could somebody come out of that? You're like, I guess so. But now you brought in Jalen Johnson, and you feel like he's got the inside track here for the other starting position. And now, those other guys are lobbying to be the backup outside corner guys. And you're like, all right, now I feel a lot better. Guys that up until, 2 days ago, we thought were going to be starters are now looking like they're fighting for a backup spot.
Yeah, this really solidifies the cornerback position, the starting positions. And I mean, look, you saw Kevin Tolliver, show some decent promise, but I think Kevin Tolliver is much better as a depth piece, personally. So I think if you have him on the roster, and then you have Johnson and Fuller as your two main guys, then I think you're looking a lot better. Because, again, we saw some struggles last year with the secondary. We really did. Part of it was lack of pass rush, and we'll get into that a little bit. But having another skilled guy in the secondary, I think, can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we needed some secondary help. We've got two very good players in Kyle Fuller and Eddie Jackson, but we parted ways with Prince Amukamara because I think he, while he was solid for a couple of years, really deteriorated last year, and based on the money he was making, it made sense for him to go. And then, we had back-to-back years of losing Eddie Jackson's partner back there in the safeties position. And I've gone back and forth. It's like, which was the bigger need, cornerback or safety? And I feel like the Bears have made that, known that they feel much more confident with Deion Bush being the second safety and needing the cornerback help, because that's what they went ahead and did, is they brought on Jalen Johnson, knowing they could have gotten any safety in the draft other than the kid out of Alabama that went McKinney. They could have had any safety in the draft to partner with Eddie Jackson, but they decided to go at the corner, Jalen Johnson. So that makes me feel like, all right, well, they felt that was a bigger need and that they got a better value with Jalen Johnson.
Yeah, and I think you can let Eddie Jackson go back to strong safety, which is, I think, where he played best. I mean, you saw last year, Clinton Dix, I thought was solid. He wasn't spectacular, but he was solid. But I think allowing Eddie Jackson to go back to strong safety, I just think that's where he's going to play best.
I think Eddie Jackson's going to be the free safety. They're going to bring in somebody to play that box.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, so I think, I think that's where Deion Bush is going to be.
Okay, interesting.
And then just looking at the free agents that are still left, is there's not a lot. There really isn't as far as safeties go. The only guy that's an interesting option is Tavon Wilson, who played with the Lions last year. And he's you could probably have him for probably like $2 million or less a season, so it makes him a financial option. And he played that box safety, and he was the 25th ranked by Pro Football Focus. He was the 25th ranked safety last year out of 88 guys they drafted. So not fantastic, but not bad by any stretch. That would be, for me, someone nice to bring aboard, because otherwise your safety, roster is pretty weak. Eddie Jackson, and then your other presumed starter is Deion Bush, and then you've got Jordan Lucas, DeAndre Houston Carson, and Kentrell Bryce. I'm not.
It drops off.
It drops off real quick, and Tavon Wilson is at least a guy that, has played, and he's played in the division. So you feel like at least, even if he doesn't win that starting spot, I'm fine if Deion Bush wins that starting spot. I don't think he's terrible. I just don't think he's special. But if
He's good. He's not great. He can get the job done, basically.
yeah, like he's not going to light the world on fire. He's not going to win any kind of award or be a Pro Bowler. And I don't think Tavon Wilson is either. But it's always nice to have a veteran that could come in and compete at that spot. And that's my concern. Is there's Eddie Jackson's going to win that spot. You can't bring in anybody that can compete with him.
No, of course not.
And Deion Bush is a guy that needs to have competition. Somebody's got to compete with him. And that's my thing is this whole roster, you didn't make the playoffs last year. Every position, for the most part, should have active competition. And Deion Bush is somebody that should have competition. And hopefully, the Bears do have a little bit of cap flexibility. It would be nice for them to bring in maybe another undrafted rookie and a low-cost veteran on a one-year deal like a Tavon Wilson, and let them compete for that spot. Because if you bring in a guy like Tavon Wilson and say on a $2 million one-year deal, it doesn't kill your salary cap. And if Deion Bush wins the job from him, okay, well, you've got a veteran backup that can come in. And if he beats out Deion Bush, you're like, okay, well, now we're happy with Deion Bush playing the backup on either of those spots. So I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But we'll see what Ryan Pace does, because that next round of wave of free agency is going to be starting up in a week or so.
Yeah, it's going to be a big time coming up pretty fast.
The next pick, so the Bears had 2 second-round picks, nothing in the third, nothing in the fourth, and they ended up with 3 fifth-round picks. So they had their own. They made a move where they traded a fourth-rounder next year to get the Vikings' fifth-round pick, the number 155, and then they traded 2 of their 6th and 1 7th to the Eagles to get a 5th and a 7th back. So they ended up with 3 fifth-round picks. The first one was Travis Gibson, defensive end out of Tulsa. And it's funny because this guy had like a pretty high draft grade. He had a draft grade that was right on par with Cole Kmet and Jalen Johnson, and you got him in the 5th. So he's defensive end, pass rusher out of Tulsa, 6'3", 261. He was first team all conference. His senior year, in 11 starts, he had 8 sacks, 15 tackles for loss. Late bloomer. I watched some tape on him earlier today, and he's got a really explosive first step. He's going to have to learn some secondary pass rush moves. He's not a very sophisticated pass rusher. He's got that first move, and that's what he does. But he's also a late bloomer, and I think he can learn, especially from a Robert Quinn and Khalil Mack. I think you can learn some of those skills. He's really athletic, flexible, and from what I'm reading, is an incredibly hard worker and a grinder. He looks like a real diamond in the rough. And being a situational pass rusher, because you've got Robert Quinn and you've got Khalil Mack, you're bringing this guy in to be a situational rusher. I think that's an ideal spot for him, because he can just pin his ears back and go.
There were a lot of mixed feelings about this pick. Obviously, there were other positions that people wanted, but the thing I'm going to say is the Bears' pass rush was almost non-existent last year. I know they had injuries. Akeem Hicks was hurt for most of the year, so Khalil Mack was getting double and triple teamed, but you saw how many times the lack of pass rush hurt them last year. They brought in Robert Quinn to help that out, but you cannot have enough pass rush, especially now. So I think that this is a very intriguing move, it's a bit more of an experiment, but you see the upside here. You see the potential that there is with this kid. So, I'm not going to complain too much. And, people that were upset about trading a future draft pick for next year, it's just a reminder that there is a lot of projected comp picks for next year for the Bears. So that is probably something that was considered when making this trade. So I'm not too upset about them trading that future pick.
I'm not that concerned. Is you needed more picks this year. Next year you'll have more picks than this. So, when you have like 12, 13, 14 picks, it's good. It's good to have a good number of picks, but if you have too many, it's bad too, because you can't bring in 13 guys. They're not going to have all have roster spots. So you sort of waste some of those picks for no reason.
Yeah, and you don't want that.
So having that many picks. So at a certain point, if you're a team that has that many picks, you need to start wheeling and dealing and getting future. And that's what Bill Belichick is like a master of, because he'll have 12 and then he's like, well, if I see somebody I want to move up and get, okay, well, I've got all this. He's like a dragon sitting on top of his gold pile of gold, with his number of draft picks, and he can wheel and deal, and he can move up, he can move down, and pick up stuff for next year. And that's why he always has so many draft picks, because he'll move back, and then when he identifies somebody in the second or the fourth or whatever, he can move right back up, and he's got this whole cache of draft capital that he can trade to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where Ryan Pace needs to get, because I think Ryan Pace could do some good things if he had 10, 12 picks, but he's been so aggressive that, he hasn't been able to do that yet.
Right. So I can't be upset about that. I think you did address a real need right there. Obviously, people bring up other areas, but I think pass rush is a legit need. And, you think about it, if he works out, and then you have Khalil Mack, and you have Akeem Hicks, and you have Robert Quinn, you have that whole front seven, you're looking at something potentially good there, and you have depth too. So that's something that they really needed to add.
Yeah, and, the edge rushers, you feel very confident with your top two guys, Quinn and Mack. You probably have the best or one of the best tandems in football as far as rushing the passer. But then after that, you've got Isaiah Irving, James Vaughters, Barkevious Mingo, before the draft, and that's not really going to do it. Barkevious Mingo was a guy who was drafted very high. I think he was the 6th overall pick in the first round a couple of years ago. Just never really materialized to be that guy. Isaiah Irving is a guy who's just haven't done much. James Vaughter was a camp hero last year, but, didn't do anything and was cut several times. And now you bring in Travis Gibson, and you feel like, all right, he's got the opportunity there to win that number 3 edge rusher spot and really try to create havoc. Is because somebody's got to be that rotational pass rusher. Somebody of those guys, one of those 4 guys now has to be the guy that steps up. And I think Travis Gibson has by far the most upside of that 4.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt. I mean, that's obviously why they took him. And just think about this too. When you have that depth now, and if Travis Gibson really is who they hope he's going to be, then you don't have to exhaust Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn as much. It's kind of one of those, well, if you take Mack out to rest up, then you have this other brute force right there. So it's not like we're easing down on the competition. I think that's really big. That's really important.
Because I'm looking at the names of guys that are still available as far as edge rushers, and the cupboards are kind of bare. I mean, you've got Jadeveon Clowney, who is just, he's looking for $20 million a year, does not fit in to what you're looking for, because you have two starters that are as good, if not better, than Jadeveon Clowney.
And you don't have the money.
You don't have the money. You don't have the space. What you need is a backup. The next best pass rusher that's available is Everson Griffin, who was solid, but he was another guy that earned big money last year, $15 million. So you expect him to probably sign a fairly big contract. And then after that, it just drops off precipitously. You've got Lorenzo Alexander, Marcus Golden, and then this is how far down the into the well you have to dig, is the next best guy as far as Pro Football Focus rankings, Pernell McPhee. So, I mean, that's what you got. So I think it was really important to pick up Travis Gibson, and you hope that you can develop those secondary moves, and for being a guy that's not being your primary, that you can give him that time to develop. Having that explosive first step is a trait that you can really dig down and do something with.
Especially when you're facing potential star quarterbacks. Like when you have to face Aaron Rodgers 2 times a year, or when you might have to face a Drew Brees in the playoffs, or, any of those types of guys. It's good to have.
You mean we face Love twice a year?
Yes, of course. Of course. Because Aaron Rodgers is going to demand a trade to New England.
Oh my God. Can you imagine if he got traded to New England?
If he got traded to New England, they would frickin' run away with the Super Bowl. Belichick would work his magic. Aaron Rodgers would work his magic. They'd have another Super Bowl.
Stupid Aaron Rodgers. And then with the actual Bears 5th round pick, this was an interesting one. Is Kindle Vildor, cornerback out of Georgia Southern. So a small school guy, 5'10", 191, ran a 4.440, so he's fast. I watched a little bit of tape on him. He's really athletic, good body balance, long arms, fluid hips, really quick. Although he had good track speed, watching him play, it didn't translate into good top line speed as far as on the field. He was susceptible to double moves, and he's not that interested in tackling, kind of like Deion Sanders was. If there's guys already there doing it, he's not going to jump in to clean it up. He's just going to let the tackle happen or try to drag guys down. But I think he's a little bit of a reach. So I'm curious to see. How he's going to work out.
This one kind of surprised me. I'll tell you.
Yeah, out of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 picks that the Bears had, he's the head scratcher for me a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I don't hate the pick. I'm not saying this is awful, this is terrible, but I mean, I felt like there were other needs that needed to be addressed, and like you said, this one felt like kind of a reach, and hopefully he does work out in some form. But yeah, this one's got me scratching my head a little bit, just like you, and I think a lot of people feel the same way. Though there are some people who seem to like his skill set, and hopefully that translates in a good way. I just, when I saw the pick, I'm like, wait, what? Really? Another cornerback? And a guy who is projected to go this high?
Yeah. Small school guy, Georgia Southern. So I am curious to see. The Bears must have seen something. I have to dig a little deeper. I don't know if he was at a bowl or something that the Bears were at, or some sort of practice that they were at, that they saw something. But clearly they were very high on him, and I watched him, and he's a very good athlete. I could see him. Potentially doing something good. It's just, this was clearly in their minds a best player available situation, and I do like that philosophy. So if you're truly going to draft best player available, then if it's another corner, then so be it. But we still have the hole at safety. Still have some holes on the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera. Then the Bears made their other trade back in the 5th round, where they traded with the Eagles and gave up pick 196, 200, and 233 to get 173 and 227. And this is another intriguing one, is they drafted Darnell Mooney, the wide receiver out of Tulane. 5'10", 176, runs a 4.38 40. Watch some film on him, and good grief is he fast. Mm-hmm. He tracks the ball really well. He is a jumper. He will go up and get the ball, which is, we had a speedster here last year, and Taylor Gabriel, who was a speedster, but you didn't see him go up and take the ball.
No.
This is Darnell Mooney will go up and take the ball, but goodness gracious, is he got a small frame, just not very physical at all. So you watch him with big corners or strong corners that do a hard press off the line. He had a hard time breaking that press and getting off the ball, and he just has such a diminutive frame that you worry about injury. But man, if you could take all that guy's pros and put him in a 6'2", 200-pound body, this guy would have been a first rounder.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can't teach speed, but it's going to be hard to make him into something probably more physical, I would assume. I don't see them really changing his overall makeup. I mean, his speed is obviously going to be his best asset. I think it's nice to have a speedy weapon like this. I really do, as long as you utilize him correctly.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears, as far as wide receivers go, I don't think they have a bad group of wide receivers. It's the thing with wide receivers is, you have to have specific skill sets and different types of wide receivers. So it's not just like, oh, we have wide receivers. The Bears were lacking a guy to take the top off the ball. So you have Allen Robinson, who's a number one, regardless of what certain folks say. Allen Robinson is a number one receiver.
He's special. Just watch him. Don't look at the numbers. Just watch him. He is a special guy.
I really like Anthony Miller.
Me too. I'm higher, I think, than some people are on him.
If we can keep that shoulder healthy, I'm very high on Anthony Miller.
Yeah.
Riley Ridley is a guy that we're excited about. We can kind of see more what he can do. Javon Wims is a guy he's got so much talent. I want to see him put it together. We still have Cordero Patterson, who I hope
mainly your special team weapon.
I hope we can utilize him more.
Me too.
But now we're adding Darnell Mooney to this list, and I think you can even if you're not utilizing him to take for on deep balls and things like that, is he's a guy who can take like a slant pass and just take it to the house. He's got that kind of speed, and he opens up things for Allen Robinson and Anthony Miller, by just taking the safety with him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good skill to have.
It's a very good skill to have. Like you said, you can't teach speed.
Nope.
Having a guy that has that kind of speed and picking him up late, it's at that point, late in the 5th round, like late in the 5th, you start having early fifth, you can still potentially draft guys that you're looking at as them as a complete player. But when you start looking at late fifth, sixth, seventh rounds, you're just looking at traits. Because there's going to be guys that end up being good, but mostly there are guys that have a flawed game in college. You have, medical issues, off the field issues. They had holes in their game, and you're drafting traits. So his trait, the guy has speed all day.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. I was saying so many times last year what you just said a few minutes ago. Would love to see them utilize Cordero Patterson more, because you see what that guy can give you with his legs. And if you have multiple weapons like that and you can utilize both of them, you can really burn some guys. I mean, Cordero Patterson, I think, is more versatile, obviously. But if you have a guy with Darnell Mooney's speed, you can still utilize that in a simple but effective way. Like you said, like a slam pass that he could just zoom right by people. I feel like Nagy needs to simplify things while being more mixed with what he does. You mix things up more, you'll utilize more things, but you don't try to overcomplicate it. This gives you a chance, an even better chance to do that. You now have multiple weapons that can use their speed. You can utilize that more, and you don't need to do anything fancy with it. Do you know what I mean?
Right. So I think he's going to be somebody that you put him in a package. He's not going to be out there, especially being a from a smaller school. Tulane is not a powerhouse football school, but he's from a smaller school, young wide receiver. You're not going to put all the pressure on him, but you're going to find packages for him and try to utilize that speed to create mismatches.
Right.
So then the Bears ended up no longer having a 6th round pick, because they traded basically both of their 6th rounders to move up to get Darnell Mooney. And you had your 2 7th rounders who are just massive human beings. The first one is Arlington Hambright.
You mean Arlington Heights?
Yes. He's about the size of Arlington Heights. He's an offensive tackle from Colorado, 6'4", 307. And I watched a little bit on him. I couldn't find a ton, but for a guy that big, he is athletic, and he can play every single position on the offensive line. So that versatility is nice, because, when you're looking for your final roster spots, is if you have a guy that can only play tackle, only play on the right side, only play tackle, it makes it really hard to come up with your final roster, because you end up keeping more positions, more spots open for guys, because you're like, all right, well, I have to have a backup center because this guy can't play tackle. He can only, or can't play center. He can only play right guard, right tackle. This guy is a center, but he can't, he's a backup center, but maybe we could put him at guard, but we definitely can't put him at tackle. This is a guy that can play all 5 positions, and he played primarily left tackle at Colorado, which is a powerhouse school and a powerhouse conference.
Yeah, people were saying on Twitter earlier, and I have to agree, just kind of based on what we've seen, when you're looking at last round picks like these guys, you see a higher success rate of linemen than other positions. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah.
So I think that, obviously while some people wanted to draft linemen earlier, the fact that we at least were able to get some, even in the 7th round, it could still make a positive impact. And I think this guy, for the size he is, for the athletic qualities that he has, he can make a difference, a positive difference for this team.
Yeah, I mean, Does he make this roster? I don't know. I mean, if he does, it'll be as a backup. But it's always nice to have offensive linemen on your practice squad that you can groom. Because, usually when you draft guys late, they need some seasoning. They need to get stronger. And
right, it's hard to plug them in right away.
Yeah, it's hard to plug late round picks. And if you look, Charles Leno was a 7th round pick, and they groomed him to be the left tackle of the future in their minds. So that's kind of what you look for, is that diamond in the rough that you can groom into being a good offensive lineman. And the thing is, the offensive line is one of the positions where you can have a guy that's the number 1 overall pick all the way through an undrafted free agent from big school to tiny school. And it's kind of the great equalizer, because you look at guys from all over the place, very successful offensive linemen from every walk of the way they came into the draft or into a NFL.
Right, exactly. It's funny because I was thinking earlier, okay, we're drafting in the 7th round. We're drafting what we need. And, like I said, you can find success in a later round, with offensive linemen, with linemen in the 7th round, even if it is really late. But what I was thinking, too, is, we also brought in some really highly touted lineman coaches this offseason. So, you hope that they can kind of work their magic a little bit here, because like you said, they do need oftentimes these kind of guys do need seasoning. They do need to work it out. It's hard to just plug them in and make it work, but you can make it work through maybe a longer, more painful process, but you can make it work. And if they have the good coaching, that can really help things out.
And then the last pick the Bears had is another massive human being, is Lachavious Simmons, offensive lineman from Tennessee State, 6'5", 315. Now, this is a guy, I could not find any tape on him, but I read some notes on him, and they described him as a bloodier nose, grinded out, road grading offensive lineman.
So he's a meatball lineman.
Yes, he is. He is that guy that you just plug in and you're like, David Montgomery's like, big man, here's a Rolex. I want you to plow everybody in there and give me some space. And, I look at him as a project probably, but
sure,
if you could get him to play right guard, I think you have that's the kind of guy you want as your right guard, is a big, massive road grader.
Yeah. I think you said it best, because like you said, I can't really find much on the guy.
So, kind of looking at the Bears depth chart and roster, do you feel good at wide receiver? You don't feel great, but you don't feel terrible. I think you've got enough guys that can do things. So you've got Allen Robinson, Cordero Patterson, Anthony Miller, Riley Ridley, Javon Wims. That's 5 guys right there that you're like, okay, those are roster locks. And then it comes down to you're probably keeping 6 wide receivers. So Reggie Davis, Darnell Mooney, Alex Wesley, and Thomas Ives. So you feel probably Darnell Mooney's going to make that spot because of the draft status.
Right.
Tight ends, we went through that, and a lot of guys, but still not a great batch right as of right now.
You're just hoping your draft pick can make an impact, and hopefully somehow by some prayer Jimmy Graham can drink from the fountain of youth, but don't really count on it.
If Jimmy Graham, I read an interview where he said he was not happy with how last year turned out, and he's this year he's planning to prove that he's still got it. If he's got what he got 3 years ago or 2 years ago, and you're like, okay, 3 years ago, you're like, oh, thumbs up. But You know, if he can find some semblance of what he looked like, and
you'll never get the in prime Jimmy Graham, but if it's significantly improved.
If you can get a guy that knows the offense, runs correct routes, catches passes, not even do great things after it, but just make those catches.
Just don't drop the damn ball. Yeah.
If he finds the open spot in zones, catches the ball, and just plays in the offense well, I think we're fine. Because I don't think we're going to be asking him to do these things like, take this 5-yard pass and then run it to the house, or run a fly pattern from the tight ends position. I don't think we're really asking him to do that.
See what you did in 2014. Do that.
Yeah, we're not asking him to do that. So I think you're scaling back what your expectations are for Jimmy Graham, and if he plays 16 games and is a veteran guy and catches the passes that he's supposed to catch, and makes those third down catches, converts them to first downs. I think that's a win.
Yeah, I think so too.
If Cole Kmet can come in there and be be the best tight end from the draft and do something, and we're not going to ask him to do the world either. If he just comes in and shows us, oh yeah, this guy was worth drafting in the second round, and you see improvement through the year, I think we're in a much better spot than we were last year, because last year we had hot garbage.
Yeah, that's putting it nicely.
Offensive line, yeah, I like Cody Whitehair. I do like James Daniels.
Me too.
Charles Leno Jr., if we can get him, last year he was terrible, but if we can get him back to what he was 2 years ago, I think from center to the left side, we're okay. It's the right side, got to figure it out.
That alone would make a huge difference. With Charles Leno.
Who's going to win that right guard spot? Does Bobby Massey bounce back? But
I'm a little weary about that.
I'm a little weary about that as well, and we've got a lot of bodies there, a lot of young bodies. Alex Barr, Sam Mustafar, these 2 new draft picks. You've got some bodies there. I'm curious of what this new offensive line coach is going to be thinking, what we're going to do, because there's not a lot out there in free agency as far as offensive linemen go. So this is kind of what you got, so I think you can get out your, a roster of offensive linemen, because you got your 5 starters. Well, you've got 5 guys, one spot you're battling for. So between Afidi and Coward, one of those guys probably going to lock up the right guard spot. So then the other one's the backup. Alex Bars you're probably keeping, because I think he can play multiple positions.
Yeah, I'd like them to keep him.
And then you're probably keeping maybe a Jason Spriggs. Maybe one more guy. So I think you can put together a roster. It's just not the best of rosters. I think you're going to have to work with what you got there. Quarterback is what it is. Running back was a position that I was disappointed that we didn't get somebody else.
Well, I mean, it looks like they're going to put their faith in Tariq Cohen again. I think that they're going to try to see if he could bounce back and be more like he was 2 years ago.
He's not an inside runner. And
no, he's not. Quite the opposite.
So I'm fine with listing him as a running back, but I think you need, he's not the guy that you just want to pound up the middle. You want to use him for screen passes, as swing passes and things like that. Is David Montgomery is your pounding running back. Ryan Nall is a fine guy to have on the practice squad, but he's not a special running back. You need another guy. And there's not a lot of bodies there. And I was hoping that you could grab one, because you can always find a body in the draft that can be that third running back. But they didn't. So, they're thin. They're thin at running back. And that's a little scary. Defense, I think they're still thin at safety. I think they're thin at inside linebacker. We know who our starting two are, but then the backups are Joel Iobinowe and Josh Woods and Devontae Bonds. I think you're thin there. I think you're okay. It'd be nice to have another couple bodies as far as the interior defensive linemen, but I would love to see a little bit more competition or some more bodies in these spots.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you're lucky that your starters are very, very good in that whole front seven. I mean, the starters are all very, very good. It's just when you don't have depth, then you saw the pain of last year when you don't have people that could step in nearly as well as those starters. Obviously, they're not going to be as good as those starters, but you saw how much it hurt them last year when they didn't have key guys on the defense for a number of games.
Yeah, I mean, interior defensive linemen, Bilal Nichols, Eddie Goldman, and Akeem Hicks are your three guys. And I feel very confident.
They're great. I mean, Eddie Goldman is so underrated.
Eddie Goldman and Akeem Hicks are just absolute studs. Bilal Nichols, healthy Bilal Nichols is, I think, a very good player. And then backups is you got Brent Urban, who stepped in last year and did some nice things. Roy Robertson Harris, who I like, and Abdullah Anderson. So you've got some guys that just is not a ton of depth. Outside linebacker, you got a lot of bodies. We talked about the corners. Safeties is just I hope that they sign a veteran. I would be surprised if they don't. I just think they need to bring in a veteran to push for that starting spot with Deion Bush.
Yeah, I mean, you have Eddie Jackson, who's one of the best in the business, but you need more than just one. And I think Deion Bush is a solid player, but it really drops off after that.
But just because the draft is done, doesn't mean that they were done bringing in young players. The Bears brought in some undrafted free agents, and they brought one notable name in. I don't know if you saw this yet. They brought in an edge rusher from the University of Buffalo named Mack.
As in
Khalil Mack's little brother, Ladarius.
No, I didn't see that.
Yep, they signed Ladarius Mack, who it pales in comparison to his brother, but that's an interesting story. It's going to be a fun one. But so far,
Absolutely.
They've brought in 2, 4, 6, 8. They've signed 8 undrafted free agents. So they signed a defensive lineman, LaCale London from Western Illinois. 2 offensive linemen, Dieter Easelin from Yale, and Badera Traore from LSU. Running back Artavis Pierce from Oregon State. Edge rusher Ladarius Mack from Buffalo. Wide receiver Ahmad Wagner from Kentucky. Defensive lineman Trevon McSwain from Duke. And linebacker Rashad Smith from Florida Atlantic. So they will be bringing in some guys. The one guy that I thought would have been interesting that I would have liked to seen to add as an 11th tight end would have been Randy Moss's son, Thaddeus.
Yeah, who got him? I can't remember who got him.
Redskins. The Redskins signed him as an undrafted free agent. So that would have been fun, to see that happen.
I was kind of hoping they'd get Gordon, the quarterback.
I mean, I don't know.
Seattle got him.
Did they?
Yeah, they signed him.
Okay, because it's right now is that like I love watching the scramble to see who's signing guys, and we'll have a better picture probably tomorrow or Monday of the full list. And for our next episode, I'll try to find some tape on some of these guys. I'm hoping that Artavis Pierce. I don't remember watching any film on him. I'm hoping that he's a guy that can actually do something, because it would be nice to have the depth at running back. I very much like Tariq Cohen, but he's not really a running back. He's a gadget back.
Right.
So you have David Montgomery, and then it goes to Ryan Nall. Like it would be nice to have another complement to David Montgomery. And so we'll see what we have with Artavis Pierce, or if they bring in anybody else.
Can we get Jordan Howard back?
I don't even know where he is right now.
I think he's in Miami now.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, so he's going to be with Tom Brady and Gronk?
No, that's Tampa.
Oh, it's Tampa. Oh, ooh, Miami. What's
I
in
said
Miami?
Miami.
What is in Miami? Tua.
Tua.
Booga. I can't pronounce that name.
I just call it Tua. It's much easier.
He's just Tua.
Tua.
So let's talk for a minute about what the hell we saw with Green Bay.
Yeah. That was something. That was something.
So I saw a little bit of Love film, and he's got a big arm, but man, he needs a lot of things to clean up. And so I mean, when you watched, so they talk about, well, when they had Brett Favre, they brought in Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was a very good player. He was so good they had him at the draft. He was expected to be a top 10, top 15 type guy, and he just slid. So you knew he was going to, he had a lot of good traits on him. So Aaron Rodgers was a guy, the guy that they just drafted. I don't think he has the same skill set. He's got a big arm, and I know a lot of people are like, well, they got to find the next, Patrick Mahomes. But just because a guy has a big arm doesn't necessarily mean anything. Jay Cutler had a big arm. There's been guys with big arms. It just doesn't mean it translates and you're like, well, they sit for 3 years. What do you learn from sitting for 3 years? You sure might learn the offense, but you don't learn to be a better football player. You don't learn the speed of the game. I mean, Patrick Mahomes was he learned. Like, you know what? Patrick Mahomes, if he would have played his first year and not sat, guess what? He would still be the best player in football right now.
The Bears fan in me is saying this guy's just going to be a Hall of Famer because that's what the Packers do. The football fan in me, part of me is still saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer because that's what the Packers do. But, I do want to point this out. People were comparing the Aaron Rodgers situation to the Brett Favre situation, that whole thing when he was drafted in 2005. I mean, you said something very key just now. Rodgers was a very notable prospect. He was a top-tier talent going in the draft. Hurts was not. The other thing, too, is the Packers, while I still believe they weren't nearly as good as their record showed last year, they're still in a window of contention. And they were one win away from the Super Bowl last year. And they're trying to get one more. At least I would think they're really trying to get one more Super Bowl while Rodgers is still there. At least I would think. But remember, when they drafted Aaron Rodgers in 2005, they were coming off a 4-win season. Yeah, Brett Favre was around the same age as Aaron Rodgers is now, but I think there's a difference between having a team that was 1 win away from a Super Bowl with obvious holes versus the Packers back then, who were really looking for the future because they were coming off like a 4-win season. I think there's a big difference there. You know what I'm getting at? That's why it makes it more weird, in my opinion.
I look at the Packers draft, and you're right. They were right there, could have gone to a Super Bowl, and they drafted with their first pick, a quarterback that's not going to help them next year. They drafted in the second round a running back who he's a solid running back. I'm not going to deny that, but was running back a big hole for them?
No, they had Aaron Jones.
I think that they raved about, that was the guy. He was what they needed. Packers haven't had a great running game. We got Aaron Jones. And you drafted another running back. So is he helping you? No, not really. Third round, you drafted a tight end who's, he looks okay, but is he going to step in day one and be helpful to you in a team that didn't have much in a tight end? No, I don't think so. And then you didn't have a fourth rounder. And then fifth rounder, you picked Kamal Martin, who I don't think is going to be a big help for you. So you did not get anybody that's going to step in day one and help you, and for a team that was really close to making a Super Bowl. So as a Bears fan, you got to consider that a win. You feel like that's a failed draft.
It seems like they want to rebuild while contend. You know what I mean? Like, they're thinking about the future clearly, but you're still in a window of contention, and I almost feel like they're banking on getting the same breaks as they did last year. And keep in mind, this coming year, the Packers have a significantly more difficult schedule, and it's hard to stay as healthy and get all the same breaks in 2 years in a row. I mean, just look at the Bears, for goodness sake, last year versus 2018. It's weird. It really is weird. And some people are saying, was this a way to spite Aaron Rodgers in a way? But that would be why would you do that? Why would you try to spite one of the greatest football players ever when you still want to win a Super Bowl with him? I mean, let's face it. I would love to have the success that the Packers have had, but you look at what people all around football say about them. They've had Aaron Rodgers for how many years? You would think they'd have more than one Super Bowl right now, right? So wouldn't you try to fix all the holes immediately while you still have him?
Absolutely. You could have drafted a top-notch running or wide receiver. You could have gotten the number one tight end in the draft. You could have done a lot of different things, and you could have, instead of trading up, you could have traded back and had a plethora of second round picks where you could have drafted, multiple guys that could help you right away. And you didn't.
And just to make a quick point, we talked about Darnell Mooney. From what I saw, it sounded like the Packers might have been interested in him, so the Bears were able to swoop him away from them. Just saying.
Yeah. So, the Packers just don't. There's, they didn't draft anybody that helps them. So that tight end, Mercedes Lewis is their starting tight end, is their number one guy. Your running back situation, Aaron Jones is still your number one guy. Aaron Rodgers is your number one quarterback. So you needed a wide receiver. You got Marquez Valdez-Scantling,
who I love that name, by the way,
and Devontae Adams, and really after that, you don't have anything. So Why wouldn't you go out and get a wide receiver? You could have got a stud with that first round pick.
Yeah, you could have.
You could have, if you were going to trade up. Imagine they would have got CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah.
They could have traded up, used some of those picks and picked up. And imagine the Packers with CeeDee Lamb. Aaron Rodgers would have been like drooling all over the place.
And you remember, Aaron Rodgers really wanted guys like that.
But instead, he goes to Dallas, where that is just a juggernaut offense.
And yet they'll still find a way to go 8-8 or 7-9 somehow.
The Mike McCarthy effect.
Oh, that could help them. That could definitely help them. I'm just saying it's usually the Cowboys, but I keep forgetting Mike McCarthy's their head coach now.
It's true. He is their coach.
Yeah. He stayed over at Jerry Jones's house.
And Jerry Jones, what's up? So just a few things about the draft is, number one, why was Jerry Jones broadcasting from like a $250 million yacht?
Because he's Jerry Jones.
Why did Mike Vrabel let his goofy ass kids do goofy ass things on TV?
That I don't have an answer for you.
I mean, number one, the one kid's got a mullet. The other one's dressed as Frozone from The Incredibles. The other one's taking a dump on TV.
That was so weird.
He took a dump on TV. And, like, they were trying to say, oh, no, it wasn't what it looked like. He had his pants down. He was on his phone, sitting on a toilet. Like,
yeah. Entertainment, I guess.
It's like every time I saw Mike Vrabel's house, I was like, there's just something more weird. I'm like, all right, more weird. And then suddenly I saw Sarah Spain point that out, and I was like, wait a minute. So I'm rewinding. I'm like, the kid's taking a dump with the door open.
Yeah.
They put doors on bathrooms for a reason.
Oh, that's so weird.
So it's not broadcast on ESPN.
I really wish Mike McCarthy was just on that yacht, just sitting in the background.
And if I was Mike McCarthy, honestly, I would do nothing but pretend I was Andy Reid through the whole draft. I would grow a mustache just like Andy Reid. I would wear the Tommy Bahama shirts like Andy Reid. I would act like I was Andy Reid the whole time to see if Andy Reid even noticed.
That would be funny.
That would be amazing.
Be really funny.
But there was so many goofy things. The girlfriend that was hugging on the guy that got drafted, and the mom just flung her out of the screen.
Did you see the one where the girlfriend like tried to take the phone and he just without looking just snatched it right back?
Snatched it and shook his head no. Like, oh. But there was the one guy I saw somebody was like, I was watching the draft. I saw that guy's girlfriend. He's like, I woke up my son and made him run routes out 12 at night. I was like, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
I saw that girlfriend. He's like, I had my son running routes. But yeah, so it's going to be exciting for the next couple of days to see. When I first started really getting into the NFL draft, the undrafted rookies were pretty much just camp bodies,
right?
And to a large extent, they kind of are, but more and more we're seeing those guys be productive members of teams. Mm-hmm. So it's becoming more interesting and more important. And so I'm excited to see what the Bears bring in. And so far they don't have very many. I would like to see them bring in maybe 4 or 5 more guys. And in some key positions, I'd like to see maybe a safety, maybe another linebacker, a running back, and see what we can go from there. And hopefully next week when I have the full complete list, I'll try to pull up some tape on guys. I'm excited to watch Ladarius Mack, Khalil's brother, and see what happens with him. And
yeah, absolutely. The Mack brothers kind of has a nice ring to it.
I know. Imagine if he came out good and you had the two brothers, rushing the passer.
That'd be awesome.
So then I guess we could shift gears here, and I'm sure that you watched the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance.
Oh, absolutely.
So we had our furnace go out. So I was trying to fix that last week, and I didn't get it fixed, so I was frustrated and swearing in the middle of, working on it. I missed them live, so I watched them during the week. And so I was trying to stay off Twitter and off, blocking things on social media, so I didn't, get any spoilers. But when I got to sit down and watch it, I was like, man, this was really fantastic.
It was really well done. Very well done. And it was so cool that they were able to interview so many people because you want as much perspective as you can get on it. And what's very interesting about the whole thing is that it's about a championship and a dynasty, but there's so much darkness in it that it sets a dark tone that's both kind of eerie but captivating. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's you know, as you're watching it, it's you know what's going to happen. You know that they're going to win this championship, but you're right. There was so many dark clouds hanging over it, and there was so many backstories. And it's funny because I lived through this, and I was not like like you were. How old?
Well, I was born in 94, so I was about 4 years old.
So you wouldn't have remembered any of these things
No.
going on. And it's funny because, when you live through something, usually you have a different perspective because you're seeing everything happen live. And, when you go back and rewatch it, mostly you see the highlight type things as opposed to all the gory details. It's kind of like buying the hot dogs in the package versus going to see them being made. But it's funny is I guess because I was in college, I missed a lot of the, and we didn't have, now you have the social media and it's constant access and on your phone. And I just missed a lot of the deep darkness of it. And I knew some of the things with Scottie Pippen, but I never knew the extent of things. So it's interesting to go back and be like, man, I sort of missed these details. I missed this portion and that portion. So, it gives me another perspective of something that I actually lived through.
It's just amazing how a franchise that was on top of the world for an entire decade, a franchise that had more success than any other professional sports franchise in the world, on top of everybody, could have so much background drama and dysfunction. And dysfunction is one thing that seems very consistent with the Bulls under the ownership of Jerry Reinsdorf. But you know what? There's no way that what happened then could happen now with social media, with eyes 24/7 all over the place, with people tweeting, with people taking video 24/7. You would have heard a lot more about those exchanges between Jerry Krause and Pippen and Jordan, whether it was on the bus or at the training facility or at the United Center on the road or wherever. You would have really heard more about the tension, I feel like, now than back in the 90s.
Absolutely. I think it was a different era. And, you think about even earlier than that is so many things just went completely unknown to the fans. And there was sports radio back then. But it wasn't like it was now. There were not competing networks, and there was not the social media, and there wasn't 24-hour camera access, and there was a lot of things that could have stayed under the radar, and you knew there was tension. If you lived through it, you knew there was tension, but I guess I never realized the extent of things. And just to see the more human interactions, and to get a player like Jordan, who was it's funny, Michael Jordan was easily the greatest basketball player that's ever put on a uniform. But you look at a guy like LeBron, who is much more socially conscious and politically active. Michael Jordan was not. Michael Jordan was very guarded about things. And he was brash and he was loud about in certain ways, but there was other things he was very, business-like about. And So to get some of his opinions on things, it's interesting because you're like, okay, I guess now you're starting to realize it. And to hear him talk about other players and it gives another perspective, and it's funny that it's taken this long, but now we're starting to get a better glimpse into Michael Jordan.
We are, and getting a better glimpse of the people around him. Two of the most key people, Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson. And do you want to know what absolutely disgusted me? Episode 1, when Phil Jackson told the story about how Jerry Krause treated Phil Jackson. You're taking the best coach in the world, the man who managed egos better than anybody, probably the most respected coach in professional sports at the time, and you sat him down and said, we're giving you a 1-year deal and that's it, and just ending it right there. That made me want to puke. How do you treat Phil Jackson like dirt like that?
It's really weird because, Jerry Krause, it's a Jekyll and Hyde type thing. He was a very smart man.
Yes, he was.
And I think Steve Kerr might have said it best, where he was like, he just couldn't get out of his own way.
Yes.
He wanted to put himself involved in this. And if he would have just been the puppet master of things, I think it would have turned out a little better. I think you need to tone it down a little bit, because it's funny because, you hear stories of what an amazing human being. Mitch Rosen came on the radio after and was just like, I've known him personally, and he was an absolutely wonderful man. Bill Wennington talking about you walk in and nobody's around and he's on all fours playing with kids. Just a very sweet man, but as a GM, he could be a real a-hole, and he had strong opinions about things, and if things were going to be his way, or he was going to fight it to the end.
I think the best way I could put it is things probably would have been better if he just would have known his place. He is not supposed to be the face of the franchise. The players are. But as a GM, you got to build the team. And you're going to get your credit for building the team. You're still going to wear the ring. You're still going to hold the trophy. You're still going to get paid the money. But you got to know your place. And I think that got the best of him. And I think other people would agree with that too. I also think that when you look at the situation, that you can look at both of the extremes. On one hand, the way he handled his players and his staff was as bad as it could get. But the way he actually assembled teams, he got Dennis Rodman. He traded for Scottie Pippen in the draft. He got that supporting cast together. No, he didn't draft Michael Jordan, but he built that team around them that won those championships. You need your supporting cast no matter how good you are. Like you said, he was a very, very intelligent basketball mind. No question about it. But when he got in his own way, when he didn't know his place, that's when he alienated people. And that's when he thought, you know what? I'm going to do things my way even if they're working. So I'm going to chase Phil Jackson out and bring in fucking Tim Floyd.
That was a bad move.
And you know what Tim Floyd will say, even though he was very defensive of Krause, Tim Floyd will say, look, I wasn't a good NBA coach. He's a great college coach. And you know what? That's okay. Some people are just better college coaches than NBA coaches. Managing egos in the NBA is very different than managing college kids. He's a great college coach, not a good NBA coach.
I think my favorite story is how Krause became the general manager of the Bulls.
Oh, like how he was the White Sox scout or whatever?
He was a White Sox scout, and he just went up and was like, hey, I want to be the GM of of the Bulls.
Yeah.
And then basically Jerry Reinsdorf goes and asks around the league, and everybody's like, nope, don't do it. Don't do it. And he goes, I'm going to do it. And he just made Jerry Krause the GM. Like, holy hell, is that how the Reinsdorf does business? You just like, hey, let me run this for you. Sure, no problem.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Holy cow, what kind of, like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like the inmates are running the asylum with the Reinsdorf owned teams.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, and I think it's one that a lot of people like to talk about.
Okay.
The way it ended obviously was pretty ugly. Even though they did go out in glory, they won that 6th championship, but you chased Phil Jackson out. Like you literally said, you're not coming back, which again, I thought was just abhorrent. You made Scottie Pippen want to be traded. You made him want to demand a trade. And the fact that Scottie Pippen kind of did things despite the front office and got support from your head coach, which should tell you everything about the way they had the relationship with the front office. But I think, and some people will adamantly disagree with this, I still think that it could have been done a lot more graceful, and that there was an argument to be made that the run really was coming to an end. It seemed like Jordan was kind of ready to, call it quits, even though he came back with the Wizards a few years later. Scottie Pippen was still good, but after the injury, was he really exactly the same? And then Dennis Rodman was pretty much at the end of his career. I mean, that's another big piece. Steve Kerr was going to be moving on. And you look at that San Antonio team the next year. So I think you can make an argument that the run was coming to an end. And the fact that they were able to get it together for one more year, at least you got that. The way it ended so ugly, I think, is awful, but I think it's okay to speculate if the run really was coming to an end, because I think there are some factors you could look at and say, you know what, maybe it was.
It very well could. To Jordan made the point is he felt like you should be able to defend your title until it's not yours anymore.
And that's a good point too. I see that point completely.
And I mean, I forget how bad that roster was the next year.
Oh my God, the next 3 years.
Mark Bryant, Bill Wennington, Tony Kukoc, Ron Harper, Randy Brown, Brent Barry, Dickie Simpkins, Charles Jones, Corey Carr, Keith Booth. That was just an abysmal roster.
I mean, you go from being a dynasty to being like bottom feeder of all sports bad. I mean, you remember the record of the 2000-2001 Bulls?
I don't remember the exact one, but it was bad.
I think by the All-Star break, they were like 6-42 or something.
But you're just like, oh my goodness, what a bad team.
Yeah, and if you're going to rebuild, the first few years is going to be ugly, but it never really transitioned. You did pick up some talent, but you didn't really keep them around. As the years kind of went on. And, here we are still seeking the 7th championship since 1998. Hopefully things will change now with more changes in the front office. But it's just amazing what an absolute drop it was.
And we saw how crazy close it was. Jordan could have played with the man, the myth, the legend, Fred Hoiberg.
Yeah, true, right? Boy,
the Hoy ball. So yeah, it's been interesting, and I'm really excited about these next 2 episodes that are airing tomorrow. Well, depends on when you listen to this, but they're airing on Sunday the 26th, because ESPN has advertised that there'll be a censored version that airs on ESPN2
Yeah. Boo.
for people with sensitive ears. I'm like, what the hell is going to happen in this episode that they have to have a censored version?
Well, remember that great quote? It was either episode 1 or 2 when Michael said, "Depends on how fucking bad the headache is." That was wonderful.
Jordan, man, I just, you know he's great, but to just see how great, and Larry Bird, who is a top 10 basketball player of all time, just an absolute, just phenomenal basketball player. When he talked about, that wasn't, we didn't play Michael Jordan that game. We played God in a Jordan jersey or whatever the quote was. You're like,
Yeah.
it gave you tingles, because you're just like, that Celtics team had, how many Hall of Fame level players and
5
and all-star level players. They were just a powerhouse team. And Jordan was like, all right, 49 wasn't enough, I guess, so I'm gonna have to put up 63. Just, you're like, holy shit, was that just incredible? And you just watched how he just dominated people. And it's funny because you look at the dream team, and how many of those players never won an NBA title because of Michael Jordan?
Yeah. Well, think about it. Think about all those great Knicks teams. If Michael Jordan wasn't around, they probably would have won at least one championship.
Yeah. So Christian Laettner doesn't count. David Robinson won after Jordan. Patrick Ewing never won. Larry Bird won. He did. Scottie Pippen won. Jordan. Clyde Drexler never won a title. Karl Malone never won a title. John Stockton never won a title. Chris Mullin never won a title. Charles Barkley never won a title.
And I think Charles Barkley is still a little salty about that to this day.
Oh yeah. So Magic Johnson did, but look at just how many players on the greatest basketball team ever assembled that just like never got a ring because of Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty amazing.
So it's hard to explain to people that are living in now, that are like, LeBron James is the best basketball player ever, and you're just like, it's saying that he's not is not a knock on him. LeBron James is an absolutely incredible basketball player that's absolutely dominating the era he's in, but he's not the greatest basketball player ever. I mean, he's not as good as Larry Bird. Very similar to Larry, but he's not as good as Magic Johnson. He's not Wilt Chamberlain. He's just not Michael Jordan.
There's only one Michael Jordan. And that's the thing. Like, there's just one Michael Jordan. I think it was Wilbon, who I usually don't agree with, but he said the only other two real athletes you see him getting compared to in history is Babe Ruth and Muhammad Ali. And Babe Ruth and Muhammad Ali are sports gods. Let's face it.
Yeah. So here's the best players that in the NBA that never won a title because of Michael Jordan: Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, Dikembe Mutombo, Mookie Blaylock, Steve Smith, Christian Laettner, Sean Kemp, Detlef Schrempf, Penny Hardaway, Reggie Miller, Mark Jackson, Chris Mullin, Rick Smits, Tim Hardaway, Charles Barkley, Patrick Ewing, Charles Oakley, John Starks, Karl Malone, John Stockton, and Mark Price, Larry Nance, Brad Daugherty. That's a really good list of basketball players that never won a title because they happened to play basketball in the era of Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
And you cannot tell me that in his prime, Michael Jordan wouldn't have beat a LeBron James team. Can't tell me that.
I
Wouldn't have happened.
I like to see you get into an argument with people. I'd love to see that.
I would be so angry, spit would be flying out of my lip. You'd need like a rain jacket.
You'd have like meatball sauce pulsating out of your veins.
I'd have to be yelling for somebody to be like, marinara me, marinara me.
I'm just like
Running
above,
dry
like
here.
I'm on a balcony, just dumping marinara sauce all over you.
Because it's just there's just no way you can like you can be a sane person and argue that LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan. It just doesn't happen. Michael Jordan was just so incredibly good, and it's not a knock on LeBron James. It's just absolutely not a knock. You can say somebody is the greatest ever. Hockey has no problems doing it. Hockey has no problems acknowledging that Wayne Gretzky is the greatest hockey player of all time.
Easy. It's probably the least debated of the major sports.
And, does that take anything away from Mario Lemieux? No. Like, nobody goes, Mario Lemieux, Sid Crosby, man. Because they're rational people. You can be like Connor McDavid is a really damn good hockey player. But you're like, well, he's just never going to be Wayne Gretzky. There's never going to be another Wayne Gretzky ever. Ever.
He's the great one.
He's the great one. So it's just like, that's like, I appreciate that where people just like, you know what? I'm perfectly fine. Patrick Kane is going to be the best American born hockey player ever. And I love Patrick Kane and I'm going to, he's always going to have a place in my heart as a Blackhawk and winning 3 titles. And, but I'm never going to be like better than Wayne Gretzky.
Right.
Because I'm not an idiot. I don't wear tinfoil hats. But basketball brings that out, man. It's just like, there was a while like Kobe Bryant is better than Michael Jordan. Like, bruh. And then now it's LeBron James. And, in a couple years, it's going to be somebody else. It's going to be, I don't know who.
If anyone tries to say Steph Curry is, oh my God.
Like there's, Steph Curry, you could argue Steph Curry is the greatest pure shooter that's ever played the game.
Right, but not overall player.
And if you said that, I'd go, all right, I can buy that. Reggie Miller was a phenomenal shooter as well, but I could say Steph Curry, I could see that. If you told me Steph Curry, if somebody put a gun to your head and said, you have to pick one person to hit, from 10 feet beyond the 3-point line, and otherwise I'm going to shoot you, I'm picking Steph Curry, but does that mean he's the best basketball player? LeBron James is a phenomenal basketball player. He's a great defender. He can play all 5 positions. But just, and he should have been MVP more than he has. There's not a knock. It's just not Michael Jordan. Magic Johnson, I would probably say is the second best basketball player ever. I would argue that, but he's not Michael Jordan. I just don't.
Magic Johnson would even tell you that.
Yeah, when Magic Johnson's just like, I'm not Michael Jordan, and he's friggin' Magic Johnson. It's just, I don't know, it's just hard to argue. The guy just, not only was he phenomenal, he was just had the will to win. Just you couldn't.
That can't be said enough.
You couldn't tell him he couldn't do something because he was going to do it.
Yep.
And I loved the story where he would play basketball with his brother and they would get into fist fights.
Does that not surprise you? Like, not at all.
No, like I just so ultra competitive. And it's just insane. And I don't think they've said this story yet on the Last Dance documentary, but I've heard this before, that Horace Grant apparently grew up with a ping pong table. And so he was very good at ping pong. And he was playing Michael Jordan at ping pong and beat him. And Jordan was pissed. Just absolutely pissed.
He took off his earring and probably like stabbed him in the eye.
So apparently Jordan went out and bought a ping pong table and just practiced ping pong and practiced until he was really good. And then he wouldn't let Horace Grant stop playing until he beat him.
That's so Michael Jordan. I love it. I love it.
I was like, over ping pong. Like, it's insane, that competitive nature. Can you imagine being his kid? Like, you're just like, man, like, nothing's good enough, man.
I mean, remember when his son played basketball? Imagine trying to fill the shoes that can't be filled.
Yeah. I wonder what his kids do now. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know either. I really don't know either.
Like, they just sort of, it's amazing how off the radar they've been for most of their lives, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, they're not really in the spotlight.
I mean, his ex-wife Juanita has, she's been fairly in the spotlight. It's, it was hard to keep her out. His new wife, somewhat in the spotlight, but because like they were with Michael Jordan, but his kids, really, he's done a phenomenal job of sheltering his kids, which is, kudos to him on that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what he wanted all along. It's probably did what he wanted all along, and like you say, he's done a good job of that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to do. It's hard when you are, at one point you were probably the most famous person to walk the face of the earth, and
I mean, he still kind of is.
And he's still up there, but it was a time that he was just Jordan. He was Air Jordan, and he's still extraordinarily famous. But there was just, at that time period where you couldn't find a corner on earth where they didn't know who he was.
Oh yeah, I mean the '90s, he was the biggest celebrity on earth, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and to be able to shield your children where they're just, hidden, that's amazing. But another good story was, good thing from the documentary is where that foreign reporter was trying to ask for his autograph, and the look Jordan shot him before, like, the Bulls assistant came over was like, no, you can't do that. No.
Yeah. Was it, who did he give that brace to or whatever, like the band he had around his wrist? Like somebody came and got it or something? I'm trying to remember.
I don't know.
Somebody went up to him and said, "Can I have that?" And he took it off and gave it to him.
But somebody I know has a child with a Down syndrome or a disability, and was in a commercial with Michael Jordan back in the 90s for Special Olympics or something. And, it's funny. They were like, they said, like, during that day, it was probably hard because there was a lot of people with, disabilities that are, all around Jordan. And he said he was so great with everybody, took pictures with everybody, signed autographs. And I was like, man, that's funny. Cause that's not who he portrays as the rest of the time.
No.
So it's nice to see that he can just switch it on and off when he wants to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I'm excited for the next episodes because we're going to get more Dennis Rodman.
Yes.
More Dennis is more gooder.
More gooder.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the TuneIn app, Google Play, Spotify, any of them, just hit subscribe. Follow us on social media at ShyFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Thank you guys. Share the podcast with your friends. That's how we grow the show. But thank you guys so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like number New Yorkers. Smoking crack is not legal on planes.
Bears 31 to -7.
The Bears. Oh, when the Bears go berry.